Well, thank you all for coming. It's such an honor for me to be here, and I've so enjoyed my time in Pune. I was just wondering, what is Gita Satsang? What should I talk about? And so I was thinking of all the wonderful hospitality I've received, and this morning we had a wonderful breakfast that was more like a banquet. And then barely 2 hours later, we were eating a Mexican lunch, and thought, maybe I should talk about the verse that starts out, yoga is not for him who eats too much. And then I heard Alata's introduction. I hadn't thought of telling any stories, because in half an hour, how much of a story can you tell? When you've got the Mahabharata, which you could do for months and not finish it. But I thought of something that I'll share with you just briefly. And it's something that hardly anybody in America knows about. And I'll bet you there are a few people in this room who might not know about it either. Because did you know that there are actually 2 Bhagavad Gitas? There are 2. There are 2. And I'm going to tell you where the second one came from. The Battle of Kuruksetra is over. We're in Shanti Parva, I think it is. Everybody, the few people who survived have gone home. And Krishna and Arjuna are just enjoying each other's company after all the turmoil they've been through. And they're kind of sitting on the riverbank, and Arjuna they're reminiscing a little bit about what they'd just been through. And Arjuna says to Krishna, Krishna, you remember just before the battle, you drove my chariot out into the middle of the battlefield, and you where I could gaze upon the opposing army, and I sort of lost it, and I didn't want to fight, and you gave me all those high teachings that inspired me to fight after all. Do you remember that, Krishna? And Krishna says, yes, I remember that. And Arjuna said, well, tell me, what was it you said again? And Krishna said, I am very disappointed in you, Arjuna, that you have not absorbed this high wisdom that I shared with you. In fact, I myself cannot remember quite what I said. So he went on to give a different Bhagavad Gita. It's true, I'm not kidding. And believe me, we got the right one. Because the second one's a little boring. It's got all the 5 thises and the 7 that's and the 10 this others, and yeah, we got the right one. So I was a little back and forth with Lata before about what this evening was going to be about, and at some point, some of the devotees here found out that up in Delhi, one of the workshops I was giving was how to remove your karmic blocks. And everybody said, oh, that's what we want in Pune too. Let's have karmic blocks, or let's get rid of karmic blocks. I thought, okay, so maybe I'll talk a little bit from the Gita about karmic blocks. First of all, what are they? I mean, are they any different from just plain old karma? And I'd like to share with you a little quotation from Yoganandaji's commentary on the Gita, which is an interesting one. It really tells us something about what these karmic blocks are. It says, every action produces a karmic reaction, manifesting sooner or later for good or ill. All right, we all know that, karma. But then he goes on to say, every action also leaves a trace in the subconscious mind and tends to repeat itself until it becomes a formidable, automatically performing habit. So I'm going to read that second sentence again, because that's the karmic blocks. Okay? Every action also leaves a trace in the subconscious mind. The aspect of you that has to do with memory, and tends to repeat itself until it becomes a formidable, automatically performing habit. And pretty much all of us have a little bit of that. Because whatever you do with your mind, and whatever you do repeatedly, tends to, as Yoganandaji put it, carve a groove in your brain, and which more recent clinical research has really sort of demonstrated the truth of that everything you repeat, whether it's an outward action or thoughts or emotions, literally cut grooves in your, I mean, not in a physical way, but sort of create grooves, you could say, in your brain that make you tend to repeat those actions. And it's a very sobering thing when you think about the things that we all repeat, and we'd really rather not admit that we are repeating those thoughts. Sometimes it's about other people, or sometimes about ourselves, but they're all making leaving these traces in the subconscious mind that are just building up stronger and stronger until they become really formidable habits. And we want to be different. We want to have that daily meditation habit that we just can't seem to bring off, for example. And it's not... The reason we can't quite seem to bring it off, there's a couple reasons, but one of them is that we have spent some time not doing that, not meditating every day and making conscious decisions not to meditate on this day or that day. And we are building almost a wall between ourselves and our spiritual practices inside our brain. And the expression, you never know how much you can do until you try to undo something you've already done. That's the karmic blocks. Because we're the ones who put them there. Nobody else. It's not our culture. It's not our family. We're the ones who put them there. And the question becomes, what are we going to be able to do about those? Those tendencies we have that are really getting in our way. And you can talk about getting in your way of meditation or anything, but basically they're getting in the way of our happiness. And I'd just like to share a few thoughts on how we might go about working with those and removing some of those. A few thoughts from the Gita as well as elsewhere in Masters and Swamiji's teachings. And the first thing is simply to notice, is simply to pay attention to the patterns in your life. Patterns of behavior, patterns of thought, patterns of circumstances that you find yourself in, patterns of the people whom you find yourself with, because I'm quite sure that not everybody in this room is spending all their time with other people in this room. You're spending time with many other people, and sometimes you find yourself in the regular company of people who are complainers, people who are criticizers, people who are just pessimistic. And you think, how did I get into that? Well, guess what? You were magnetically attracted to that by your own karmic blocks. Because the law of magnetism always holds, like attracts like. And unless we're an avatar, or at least a master, we don't find ourselves in negative circumstances on repeated basis. If we're an avatar, fine, we can go into those negative circumstances to help people, but the rest of us are dragged into those negative circumstances because we have the karma to be in them, because we have the past tendencies that plant us in those circumstances. So the first thing to do is to notice. This is what's going on, and let it raise a little red flag. Maybe there's something in my behavior that is really causing me to be in these unpleasant circumstances. And maybe it's time to look not so much at the circumstances, but look at those habit patterns. Look at those tendencies that I've been probably very unconsciously creating for quite some time, and do something about them. You know, Yoganandaji said the habits of a lifetime can be changed in a day. The habits of a lifetime can be changed in a day. All it is a matter of concentration. Concentrating the mind. You've been concentrating it in one way. Now we can concentrate it in a different way. And the really good news about that is that these subconscious patterns that we've created, these karmic blocks that we've put in place, we didn't put them in place on purpose. We didn't put them in place with a lot of energy. Most of them, virtually all of them, I'd say, just got put in sort of drop by drop by drop over a long period of time, and never once was any one of those drops a great deal of energy. The energy piled up over time, but we didn't put a lot of intention into it. And that's why Yoganandaji could say that we could change the habits of a lifetime in a day, because when we start putting energy very strongly into changing those habits, we can, it's like, think of like a balance scale, right? We've put all this energy into the negative, and the scale's looking like this, but it's just a lot of small drops, but we can put a lot of glasses full on the other side, lots of energy, and at first nothing happens because this is still heavier over here. But eventually we reach the tipping point, literally the tipping point, where we have more energy on this side and the scales change. And guess what we have then in our subconscious minds? We have habit patterns that are going to support us. We still have to say yes to them. We still have to, when the urge comes to, you name it, meditation is a good one. When the urge comes to meditate, to really follow it, lest we add more to the other side and tip the scales in the other direction. So to notice what's been going on and accept that it's ours. Because we don't always want to accept that it's ours. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but it certainly happened to me before I really came into, I sort of believed in the law of karma before I ever heard the word karma. Growing up in the U.S., this is possible. But I thought, no, things have to be fair. I just sort of demand that this universe has to be a fair place. So, and something unpleasant would happen to me. And of course, we've all had this experience. I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve it. But I had this sense of overall fairness of life. So I thought, okay, somebody's made a deposit in my cosmic bank account of karma, and that means that something really, really good is going to have to balance that out. No. That's not really the way it worked. But I had to accept that it was mine. And after a while, I got cured of that sort of rejection that this belonged to me, that this was really my responsibility, when I realized that there were people around me all the time that didn't accept the consequences of things that they'd done a day ago. So to accept that it's really ours, it's in the fitness of things that we should experience these karmic patterns, even if we don't understand how. Even if we don't feel in the heart that responsibility for it. Take the words of the great masters and say, okay, it's ours. As Swami Kriyananda once started a talk, I remember him saying, great masters have said that everything is determined by karma. And he stopped and he said, everything. And it's a struggle sometimes to do that, but just to accept that this is going to happen. I'm not going to fight against it. I wanted to read you just one sentence or two sentences from a book called God Alone, which is letters by Sister Gyanamata, one of Yoganandaji's most advanced disciples. And I love this. She said, if we never had anything painful or alarming to face, if it were just joy in God all the time, what would we be? Spiritual cream puffs. Spiritual cream puffs. Talk about people who are not spiritual cream puffs. I remember a story of one of Swamiji's brother disciples, Brother Turiyananda, who was climbing a ladder once and happened to fall off the ladder, and as we would do, put his arms out to catch his fall, break his fall a little bit, and one of his arms broke with that. Instantaneously, he was on his feet and he said, "Yes, Master." Wow. Wow. It's like, I accept it all. And not only is my karma, but it's coming from you, Guruji. Because when we are on the path, that's the real viewpoint to take, that it's not just sort of the bank account settling. It's not just that. It's also from the Guru. And when we choose to follow the path of the Guru, that's one way of deepening our connection with him, is just to take it and say, yes, I accept it, I embrace it, I thank you for it. And that's not so easy. That's not so easy. I remember hearing Mother Teresa giving a talk once. I wasn't there, I heard but I have the recording of it. And she told the story of a woman who she was serving, who had a very, very painful cancer. And she was dying. She was on the verge of death. And Mother Teresa said to her, he said, take this as the kiss of Jesus. Take this disease as the kiss of Jesus. And the woman said, Mother, please tell Jesus to stop kissing me. So, what can we do? We accept it, what can we do? And that's literally what has to come to mind. What can I do? How can I act? I wanted to read you something that Swami Kriyananda threw out. Most people are more interested in protecting their delusions than in getting rid of them. He said, we won't get out of karma by waiting it out or thinking it out. We can only get out of delusion by acting. By acting. And so the question becomes, how can we act? How can we? What can we do? Well, one thing is just to, if we've been observant, if we've seen a pattern, if we've detected these tendencies we've had, is to start developing the opposite tendency. And it's not always fun. because, again, we're going against our own grain. But it's so empowering when we are willing to stand up to our own tendency, to whatever it is. We all have things, and we can put in the blank to complain, or woe is me, or if only, to begin to put out a very positive, contrary energy. It's like, again, it doesn't take nearly as long to create a stronger positive force than it did to create that strong negative force, because we are putting conscious energy into making the changes. So that is one thing we can do. Another thing we can do is, and the Gita talks about this a lot, as you all know, is to begin to basically practice karma yoga. And by that I don't mean just service, although that's a very good thing to do. I just mean what the Gita talks a lot about. Krishna talks a lot about saying to Arjuna, you don't do anything, Arjuna. I do it all. I do everything. And for us to start to take that to heart and take it out of the realm of philosophy and into the realm of daily action. And you all know this, but just to try to feel that all of our actions, but especially the physical ones, because they're sort of the easiest ones to do this way, all of our actions are God moving through us. That we're just the channel, just the instrument for God's power to flow through us to do anything. That's why one of the reasons I really like one of the asanas in Ananda Yoga is affirmation for the warrior pose 2. I joyfully manifest the power of God. Because that's what we're doing. We are manifesting the power of God in whatever we do, but it wouldn't hurt to joyfully manifest the power of God, to begin to establish that kind of a subconscious trace in the mind. And it's not easy. We're so used to thinking that we're the doer. I've got to go do this. I've got to go do that. But again, it just comes from practice, even if we can't feel it yet. And that's a big resistance point that so many of us hit. If I can't feel it, how can I get into it? You know, if it's just an idea. If it's an idea I'm supposed to somehow subscribe to. But again, this is the subconscious traces principle. If you just decide to think it enough times, after a while, it starts to become real. It starts to become a real feeling, or at least more of a real feeling, that at least some of the time in my day, at least in some activities, I can feel God flowing through me. I can feel that God is doing this, and I'm just sort of the instrument for something to happen. And when we get to that place, that's very, very freeing. And what Master said about it, he called this one of the most effective ways by which man can free himself from the shackles of good and bad karma, is to take on that practice of seeing God as the doer, which Krishna talked about so much in the Gita. And it's not as far out as it seems. God is, let's say, I can practice God is speaking through me. God is listening through you. God is sitting up through you. I mean, it's just we can practice this anytime and whatever we're doing, and we are following Krishna's advice in the Gita to see God as the doer. So that's a second way. And a third way, of course, to get beyond these karmic blocks is the Guru's grace, God's grace. God can and will do anything for us, can take us out of our karma if we are in tune. You know, you may remember in Swamiji's autobiography, The New Path, the story of the man who mastered de-jinxed. That this man had the karma to fail over and over again in his career. He wasn't a devotee. He wasn't seeking higher consciousness particularly. He was the brother of one of the disciples at Mount Washington. And Master said he de-jinxed him. In other words, he took away the karma when the man wasn't even aware that this was a possibility. How much more so then for people who are actually disciples? People who are actually striving to tune in to the Guru. And not just for the sake of divine favors, but for the sake of tuning in itself, for the sake of feeling that connection. And then that opens the door for God to come in and help us in ways that we couldn't ever do for ourselves. So we don't want to depend on the Guru to take away our karma, but we can depend on the Guru's help, at the very least, for dealing with our karma, for having the strength to get through it. As Sister Gyanamata said, we must learn to endure, and the only way to learn is by enduring. Doesn't have to be a glorious fireworks kind of conclusion, just by enduring, but not with grimness, not with the thought, oh, poor me, just by enduring with whatever shreds of joy we can bring into our lives. And I wanted to end this little discourse with a little exercise. I hope you've held on to the inner piece of the little meditation we had earlier, because this is a meditative activity that Master taught called scouring the brain. Isn't that fun? Scouring the brain of failure tendencies. He said, because we have in our brain, literally in the cells, he wasn't kidding, in the cells we have the seeds of success, and we have the seeds of failure, because we've had plenty of successes and failures in past lives, not just this life, but how many of them. They're all there, seeds there, waiting to germinate when we give it the right circumstances. And he said, you can practice this technique for scouring the brain cells of those failure tendencies. So let's sit up tall, close the eyes, lift the gaze to the point between the eyebrows, and recall in a feeling way, not just in a memory way, but a feeling way, the feeling of peace that you had in that meditation. And hopefully you still have some of it now. Bring it very strongly into your feeling nature. But also, as you gaze at the point between the eyebrows, feel a sense of intense concentration, not intensity in the sense of strain, but just all-consuming concentration. And keep that sense of powerful concentration at the spiritual eye, and lift that feeling of peace from lower in the body or even lower in the brain up to join that feeling of intense concentration. Mix those two qualities together and begin to circulate them through your brain, feeling that you are literally scouring your brain, cleansing it of failure tendencies, cleansing the individual cells that can harbor any tendencies toward failure. And cultivate the feeling of that cleansing happening. Don't leave it at the level of an idea. Even if it's just one tendency that you're able to rid yourself of, this simple practice can free you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. So, I hope you feel very clean in your brain, or at least cleaner. And we'd like to have a few minutes for questions, and with any luck, answers. So, if you have a question, yes.
My name is Neil. When you were talking about the patterns of the behaviors and everything, I just felt that I'm at the moment facing a weird behavioral pattern because of my professional requirements. I'm supposed to teach adults like children and teach children like adults because of the kind of situations they are into. Now, I'm just wondering, how am I supposed to keep myself calm and how to find kind of an equilibrium where I don't cross the line either before they cross the age limit for a particular activity that they are getting into.
Okay, the question is that he's in his job, he's having to do, you might say, move in two opposite directions in his teaching. And how can he avoid, how can he go deeply into either without it affecting the other in the wrong way, right? Would that be a fair way to express it? You know, part of it is when you're doing one thing, be doing it wholeheartedly. Don't think, okay, now I'm teaching the adults as if they're children, but pretty soon I'm going to have to teach the children as if they're adults. Don't cast yourself into the future. Don't cast yourself into the past. Be as utterly present in the moment as you can be, because that is going to enable you to do what you're doing in that moment the best, but it's also going to begin to establish that pattern of being in the moment, so that when you have to shift gears and you go to the opposite, in the opposite direction, the predominant pattern is not going to be what you were doing before outwardly. It's going to be that you are being totally in the present, meeting the needs of the present moment. That's the pattern that's going to save you, that's going to guide you through. Because yes, all of us have somewhat similar things. Maybe they're not as neatly opposite as that, but we're doing different things that use different parts of us at different times. And this is just life. This is what happens. And one thing that can help us through this is to just practice as deeply as you can. There's only one thing happening, and that's right now. Not then, not future, right now. And the mind doesn't like to do that, because the mind is proud of itself, of how it can jump around into the future and into the past. And just don't allow it. Create that other trace in your subconscious mind, a habit pattern that supports you. So that's one thing. Yeah. Yes?
How do you accurately identify tendencies which land you in difficult situation and be sure about it? Because unless you identify accurately, right, you can't work towards it.
How do you identify your tendencies that land you in difficult situations? Well, keep track of the difficult situations. And if they seem to have something in common with each other, you can bet that you have a tendency that is not, these are not karmic accidents. These are not, bookkeeping mistakes in the cosmic bank of karma. This is a tendency that you have that's landing you. And you may not immediately be able to identify that particular tendency because sometimes, let's say a tendency is to, you find yourself in situations that are very combative. Okay? Well, it could be that you're combative. You can look to see if you have a combative tendency. Or maybe you're just careless and you're not, paying sufficient attention to the situations that you're getting yourself into, and you find yourself sort of slipping in. So identify, the first step, identify the pattern, and then start to just make the assumption, this is my fault. Okay, I'm responsible. What could it be? And one thing that can be helpful is to imagine you know somebody just exactly like you. Just exactly like you, but it's not you. Because it's a lot easier to do a little bit of analysis of somebody else than it is to analyze yourself. And really try to give that person some advice, what they might want to look into as far as their own tendencies. And it can be just trial and error. You might have several different ideas. Could be this, could be that. Try to make a very concerted effort in the opposite direction of this or that and see if it changes. One more. Shivani. Yes.
I was really wanting to know the scouring of the brain. Can that be used on somebody else, like
I haven't heard that one before. I know we all have plenty of people whose brains we'd like to scour. I think I would just stick with sending positive prayers toward them. Rather than thinking that you're reaching inside their brain, cleaning house. Just do healing prayers for them. Just send good energy, supportive energy to help them in their own efforts to scour their own brain. Okay, one more. Last question. Better be easy.
There were two concepts actually that keep contradicting me. Is that you stated that, what Krishna stated is that God does everything through us. Is that we are not the ones who does anything, whereas He does everything. This actually, I feel it contradicts the concept of a free will. Is that we actually have free will and that we have the capability of performing karma itself. That's why we face it back. So how exactly does that link?
This was supposed to be an easy question. The question is there a contradiction between God does everything through us and the idea of free will? I'm going to give it. Jayaji is laughing over there. Would you like to answer this one, Jayaji? I'll give you a short answer. God is the only show in town. There's nothing else going on in this all of creation but God. It looks different. So if you're looking for free will outside of that show, there isn't anything outside of that show. So free will has to be something else than your ability to be totally outside of the domain of God. And the way Swamiji put it, he says free will is the ability to do that which is in your own best interests. Is to choose that which is in your own best interests. And even that you could say, well, God is doing that as well. Yes, in a way. But the thing that really takes away your free will is your own karma, is your own past tendencies. We think we have all this free will, and because I want to do this. Why do you want to do that? You want to do that because you've done it a lot before and you've enjoyed it, and it's diminishing your ability to make a clear decision as to what is in your own best interests. Your own karma is doing that. So to fight for your free will is to simply try to make decisions that are in your own best interests, and don't think that somehow has to, in order to be real free will, it has to be totally separate from God, because it can't be. Nothing is separate from God. So it's free will within this play that God has created. And we don't have a lot of it, but it's not God taking away our free will, it's us putting walls up around ourselves due to the actions of our past. And just not having the free will to act in our own best interests. And we all do that all the time. It's just mundane little things like, having the fourth dessert. It's just simple, stupid little things that we do all the time. Not making the choice that's in our own best interests. But then we notice the patterns. I keep doing this. I keep having 4 desserts, and I keep not sleeping well as a result. Maybe there's a connection. But yeah, it's the question we all deal with, because we want total free will. And the fact is that we've dismantled a huge portion of our own free will due to past actions. So as Ananda Ma put it, we have the free will to think of God or not. And that's about it. But that's everything. That's everything.